Hi, I'm Mina.
And I'm Yules.
Thanks for tuning in to Artificially Informed.
Welcome to the deep dive. We're here to take that just overwhelming flood of global news and really boil it down to what you need to know.
Right. Our whole mission is to connect the dots for you from high-stakes diplomacy all the way to some, frankly, bizarre innovations.
And we want to leave you feeling genuinely well-informed. This week has been, well, it's been a week of friction, hasn't it?
That's the perfect word for it. We're seeing friction between political ambitions and the hard reality on the ground.
And between, cutting-edge technology and infrastructure that's sometimes centuries old.
Absolutely. It's a story playing out everywhere. We've got nations just struggling to find their footing in a world that is shifting so quickly.
It really is. And the major themes we're diving into today really reflect that. We're going to start with the really intense diplomatic efforts around the war in Ukraine.
Which are happening, it's crucial to note, at the exact same time Russia is ramping up missile attacks.
And targeting civilian infrastructure,
Yeah.
specifically. In the dead of winter, the contrast is just jarring.
It is. But then, beyond the geopolitical, we're seeing these incredible scientific leaps.
Like what?
Well, scientists have decoded the pathway for a really promising anti-cancer compound.
Okay.
And on a totally different scale, we've basically confirmed there's easily accessible water near the surface of Mars.
Which is a huge deal for any future plans to go there.
A complete game changer for colonization, yes.
And then we have to pivot to the inability of our systems to keep up.
Right. Massive winter storms causing travel chaos across the U.S. and Japan.
And at the same time, scientists are making glue that can tow a car out of old cooking oil.
I love that. The world is inventing faster than it can manage the basics, like getting a plane to take off on time.
That gap, that's the story, isn't it? The gap between innovation and just simple implementation.
It's the narrative thread for this entire deep dive.
All right, let's get right into it. Segment 1, where the geopolitical temperature is definitely running high. So we have to begin with Ukraine. Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky traveled to the U.S. this weekend, specifically to Florida.
For these really high-stakes, highly anticipated talks with U.S. President Donald Trump.
The pressure surrounding this trip must be just immense.
It truly is. And Zelensky isn't coming empty-handed. He's bringing a significant proposal.
This is the 20-point peace plan we've been hearing about.
That's the one. And reports say it's 90% finalized. That level of readiness, it sends a message.
What's that message?
That Ukraine is determined not just to negotiate, but to negotiate from a position of strength on their terms. They want concrete guarantees.
Guarantees on what? Post-conflict stability, military aid?
All of the above. Military aid, financial support, and long-term security. But as all this diplomacy is intensifying.
The shadow of the conflict is, well, it's actively growing darker.
Precisely.
Yeah.
Russia launched just extensive, brutal missile and drone attacks on Kiev and other regions. The timing is, of course, not a coincidence.
No. The intent seems purely punitive, disruptive.
And the human cost was immediate and calculated. A third of the capital, Kiev, was left without heating.
A third of the city?
Yes, in brutally sub-zero temperatures. You have to imagine what that's like. You're sitting at a negotiating table talking about peace.
While your citizens are literally freezing back home.
Right. Zelensky was quick to call it what it is. Proof of Russia's intent to prolong the conflict, not to engage constructively. Some of the air raid alerts in Kiev lasted for nearly 10 hours.
10 hours? That's a physical, immediate rejection of the whole diplomatic process.
It is. And the road ahead is made even more complicated by these conflicting narratives coming out of Washington and Moscow.
Specifically about who holds the final say.
Yes. President Trump has made his position crystal clear.
Which is?
He expects to speak with Russian President Vladimir Putin soon. And he has asserted, very publicly, that he will have final approval over any peace proposals.
That's a fundamental assertion of U.S. power in this whole equation.
It is. And it completely changes the dynamic for Zelensky. Trump is signaling to Ukraine, to Russia, and to the entire world, really, that Kiev lacks, and this is a quote, any agreement until he personally endorses it.
So he's placing the U.S. in the role of, what, the ultimate guarantor?
Or the ultimate veto holder. It positions America as the central player, especially when it comes to security guarantees and the future of contested regions like Donetsk.
Okay, so if the U.S. holds that veto, What are the specific preconditions that Russia is laying down? What do they want?
Well, first and foremost, they're demanding territorial recognition. They want the world to essentially ratify the current lines of control.
Solidify the regions they currently occupy.
Exactly. And second, they're demanding significant disarmament conditions from Ukraine.
So a smaller Ukrainian military.
A much smaller one. Russian Deputy Foreign Minister Sergei Ryabkov, he noted that Ukraine's 20-point plan is a major departure from previous proposals Moscow has seen.
And from proposals that the U.S. had reportedly floated earlier in the conflict.
That's right. Correct. There was that leaked 28-point proposal drafted by the U.S. a while back.
I remember that. It suggested Ukraine might have to, refrain from joining NATO, the North Atlantic Treaty Organization, and reduce its military.
Yes. And Ukraine's position on that has been unwavering.
No territorial concessions.
Kyiv's official line is that ceding any territory to Russia is absolutely non-negotiable, and they see a path to NATO as essential for their long-term security.
So that leaked proposal illustrates the immense pressure on Zelensky. He's being asked to trade future security for an immediate end to the fighting.
It's an impossible choice. Everyone involved, the U.S., Russia, Ukraine, they all seem to be focused on a different, non-overlapping endgame. It's why these talks are so incredibly complex.
And the conflict's volatility, it's spilling over. It's forcing Europe to confront its own security situation.
Absolutely. After those Russian strikes, Poland had to temporarily close 2 of its airports, Rzeszów and Lublin, and scramble its fighter jets.
This isn't some theoretical war for NATO anymore. It's an active threat right on their border.
It forces an immediate, heightened state of military readiness. And this is the context for that really provocative statement from Manfred Weber.
He's the leader of the European People's Party, a very influential group in the EU Parliament.
Right. And he openly advocated for deploying German troops to Ukraine to secure a potential peace settlement.
German troops in Ukraine, why is that idea so provocative right now?
Well, for historical reasons, obviously, but also because it represents a profound shift in European defense thinking. Weber argued that Europe cannot and should not rely solely on the U.S. to guarantee peace on the continent.
Especially if the U.S. posture shifts dramatically after these negotiations.
Precisely. Deploying German troops would be an assertion of European strategic autonomy.
Sure.
They could secure logistics routes, protect humanitarian corridors.
And signal to Russia that the EU is willing to put its own boots on the ground to enforce a peace deal.
It's a massive commitment. It reflects a growing alarm in Brussels about potential U.S. isolationism.
Okay, let's move south now, to Yemen. We're seeing a really crucial rift opening up between key Gulf powers there.
Yes, between Saudi Arabia and the United Arab Emirates, the UAE. This internal rivalry is actively undermining any chance for peace in Yemen.
This is a classic case of allies who are, well, not so aligned anymore.
It's a classic case of allies pursuing diverging economic and political interests under the umbrella of a single conflict.
So what happened?
The Saudi-led coalition issued a very stern, very public warning to the UAE-backed separatist group, the Southern Transitional Council, or STC.
They told them to withdraw from positions in Hadramaut. What are the stakes there? Why is Hadramaut so important?
It's resource-rich. There's potential oil wealth, and it's crucial for controlling the coastline and key ports. The STC, which is heavily backed by the UAE, want autonomy for the South.
Which clashes directly with Saudi Arabia's goal.
Directly. The Saudis want a unified, stable Yemen that is aligned with Riyadh. The conflict is becoming less about the Houthi rebels and more about a power vacuum that both of these Gulf giants are trying to fill.
Often by proxy.
Almost entirely by proxy. And the threat of immediate action was real. Reports came in of strikes against STC positions already underway.
So analysts are now saying the status quo in Yemen is what was the, quote, no longer feasible.
That's right. When the two major external backers of one side of a conflict are fighting each other through their proxies, peace becomes impossible.
It's a battle for regional dominance.
At its core, yes. The UAE is prioritizing strategic ports and economic corridors that reduce its reliance on Saudi land routes. Saudi Arabia is prioritizing political alignment. Their interests have diverged completely.
Okay, shifting to the continent of Africa now. Two major diplomatic and military actions to unpack. First, a big diplomatic recognition shift in the Horn of Africa.
A very significant move. Israel formally recognized Somaliland as an independent state. The announcement came directly from Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu.
Now, for listeners who might not be familiar, Somaliland declared independence from Somalia way back in 1991.
It did, but it has historically lacked almost any international recognition, so Israel's decision is a huge deal.
And it's immediately seen as undermining the sovereignty of Somalia.
Of course. The internationally recognized government in Mogadishu views Somaliland as part of its territory.
And the backlash was pretty fierce and immediate.
Widespread condemnation. It came from all the key regional players:
Yeah.
Egypt, Turkey, Djibouti.
And critically, from the African Union, the AU.
Right. Their rejection isn't just about Somalia's sovereignty. It's about the dangerous precedent this sets for border integrity across the entire continent.
Africa is historically very sensitive about maintaining those colonial-era borders.
To prevent exactly this kind of widespread regional fragmentation, this Israeli recognition is seen as deeply destabilizing and could embolden other separatist movements.
All right, the second major action in Africa involved the U.S. military.
Yes, the U.S. launched military strikes against Islamic State, or IS, positions in Nigeria.
This action followed some previous criticisms from President Trump about the Nigerian government.
He had criticized their inability to adequately protect Christian communities from terrorist attacks. So this strike was presented as a decisive counterterrorism effort in West Africa.
But the narrative around the strike is, it's deeply troubling. There's a political anecdote that clashes dramatically with what people on the ground are saying.
Exactly. President Trump claimed he delayed the strike by one day to, in his words, give a Christmas present to the communities under threat.
Framing it as a deliberate gift of security.
A very deliberate, thoughtful gift. However, the reports coming from Nigerian villagers describe a harrowing aftermath.
What are they reporting?
Destruction, unintended civilian casualties, and immediate demands for accountability from the U.S. military.
That gap, framing a military action as a present, while victims on the ground are demanding accountability for devastation, that creates a massive trust deficit.
It really reveals the tension inherent in any foreign counterterrorism operation. The political rhetoric often simplifies these complex, brutal realities.
The mission was intended to protect,
But the alleged civilian casualties raise serious questions about intelligence gathering, about operational execution, and accountability for those mistakes remains a critical, unresolved global challenge.
Okay, let's pivot now. From geopolitical friction to scientific progress, it is always refreshing to talk about genuine human advancement.
I agree. And we have a significant medical breakthrough to talk about coming out of Canada.
This is from the University of British Columbia, UBC.
Yes, from their Okanagan campus. And it's a genuine game changer in what's called natural product chemistry. Scientists there successfully decoded the entire biosynthesis pathway for a compound called mitraphyline.
Okay, that sounds incredibly technical. For you and me, the layperson, what is mitraphyline and why is decoding its pathway such a big deal?
Well, mitraphyline is a type of complex alkaloid. The exciting part is that preclinical trials have shown it has potent anti-cancer properties.
And where does it come from?
It's derived from two specific plants. One is Mitragina speciosa, which you might know as kratom. The other is Uncaria tomentosa, commonly known as cat's claw. Both have a long history in herbal medicine.
So the breakthrough isn't finding the compound itself, but understanding how the plant actually makes it.
Precisely. The biosynthesis pathway is like the plant's internal biological recipe book. We knew the final product was good, but we didn't know the recipe.
And what are its anti-cancer properties?
It has shown strong anti-proliferative effects, which means it stops cancer cells from multiplying, and cytotoxic effects, meaning it actively kills the cells.
So why haven't we been using it all along?
And the problem has always been sustainable access. These plants are often rare, they're hard to cultivate at scale, and relying on harvesting them creates all sorts of environmental pressures.
And there are regulatory issues too, right? Especially with kratom, which has this controversial history as an opioid substitute.
That's a crucial point. This discovery bridges traditional herbal knowledge with modern pharmacology, but it also inherits all the baggage of its source material.
So what does knowing the recipe change?
By decrypting the pathway, scientists can now synthesize the compound in a lab. They can use engineered yeast or bacteria rather than relying on the plants at all.
Which means a sustainable, controlled production method.
Exactly. It bypasses the environmental concerns and, crucially, it should allow pharmaceutical development to proceed under strict, modern regulatory frameworks. It distances the drug from the perception issues tied to unregulated traditional use.
Okay, staying in health, let's talk about a drug that is already fully in society. Ozempic.
Yes, and the sources this week are digging into a surprising ripple effect it's having on people's personal lives.
We've talked a lot about the physical weight loss, the economic impact on the pharmaceutical market.
But this new reporting explores its sociological dimensions. Reports are emerging about how Ozempic is affecting marriage and sexual relationships.
How does a weight loss drug change the dynamics of a marriage?
Well, the physical transformation for some patients can be incredibly rapid and extreme. And weight and body image, they're deeply intertwined with our self-perception, our self-confidence.
And the dynamics within a partnership.
Absolutely. A sudden change can sometimes lead to shifts in confidence, changes in desire, or even tension if one partner changes dramatically and the other one doesn't.
So it's a reminder that a medical intervention is never just medical. It always has a holistic human consequence.
That's a perfect way to put it.
On a more concerning note, we have a list of public health threats that are very active right now.
A pretty sobering reminder of why community immunity is so important. South Carolina is dealing with a significant measles outbreak.
How many cases?
The numbers rose to 156, mostly concentrated in the northwest region of the state, around Greenville and Spartanburg. This rise really highlights the persistent challenges public health officials face trying to maintain high vaccination rates.
And a warning for people about what they're eating, especially during the holidays.
Absolutely. We have a national salmonella scare linked to raw oysters.
How widespread is it?
It's affected at least 64 people across 22 states, including Maryland, and it's led to 20 hospitalizations so far. The Food and Drug Administration, the FDA, is tracking the source, but it's a good reminder to be vigilant with raw seafood.
And with the surge in respiratory illnesses across the country, hospitals are starting to go on the defensive.
Yes. 29 hospitals and major health systems have announced temporary visitor restrictions.
Which is a proactive step.
A crucial one. It's intended to curb the spread of viruses influenza, RSV, respiratory syncytial virus, and others to protect the most vulnerable people who are already in the hospital.
Before we move to the cosmos, we have to mention this shocking systemic failure in Glasgow, Scotland.
This is a deeply distressing story from the Queen Elizabeth University Hospital. A profound failure of process.
What happened?
A family was prevented from viewing their loved one's body before the cremation. They were later informed that the wrong body had been released from the mortuary and had been cremated instead.
That's a complete breakdown of the most fundamental protocols.
It speaks to deep-seated issues within that hospital's morgue and identification system. They've issued an apology and launched an investigation, but for the family, the anguish of that mix-up is just unimaginable.
It really highlights how even the most basic, solemn procedures have to be meticulously safeguarded.
Absolutely.
Okay, from systemic failure here on Earth, let's pivot our focus outward to a place where systems still hold mysteries. The cosmos.
A welcome change of pace.
First, a simple clarification about the star that sustains all life on our planet.
Right. It's important to be precise about classification. Our sun is a G-type main sequence star.
Which is commonly referred to as a yellow dwarf.
Exactly. And that term dwarf can be a bit misleading when you think about how massive the sun actually is.
So what does it mean in scientific terms?
It just denotes its size and temperature relative to other stellar categories like red giants or blue hypergiants. And it tells us that it's in the most stable, longest phase of its life cycle.
Good to know. And closer to home, we have new findings on Mars that are absolutely critical for our long-term goals of, well, going there to stay.
New findings are pointing to easily accessible water near the surface of Mars. For decades, the focus was on the polar ice caps or deeply buried reservoirs.
But this new intelligence suggests it's much easier to get to.
Much easier. It's likely in the form of briny ice, and it's close to the surface.
So why is accessible water the single most critical discovery for colonization?
Because water is life, but it's also logistics. If it's accessible, meaning you can reach it with current or near-future drilling tech, it solves three huge problems for a colony right off the bat.
Okay, what are they?
1, hydration for the astronauts. 2, agriculture to grow food. And 3, and this is crucial, you can split water into hydrogen and oxygen.
To create breathable air.
And rocket fuel. This discovery just significantly reduces the complexity and the cost of sustaining a Mars colony.
Looking ahead a bit to 2026, stargazers have a few big events to mark on their calendars.
They do indeed. Portugal is already being named as a prime viewing location for the total solar eclipse next year.
And beyond just being a spectacle, these eclipses are important for research.
Invaluable. Especially for studying the sun's corona, which is only visible when the main disk is blocked.
And there's another event in 2026.
Yes, astronomers are tracking a rare 6-planet alignment scheduled for February of 2026.
That sounds spectacular. Which 6 planets will align and what's the significance?
The alignment is expected to involve Mercury, Venus, Mars, Jupiter, Saturn, and Uranus, though of course the viewing clarity will vary.
And why is that rare?
While individual alignments happen all the time, having 6 major bodies in a tight observable cluster is extremely rare. It's a spectacular sight for both professional and amateur astronomers, and it really helps fuel public interest in space science.
And finally, on a more personal note, we celebrated a Maryland astronaut this week.
Yes, he fulfilled his childhood dream of traveling to space.
It's a great reminder that space exploration is becoming more accessible.
Whether it's through government programs like NASA, the National Aeronautics and Space Administration, or private space tourism, these personal milestones show how the technology is advancing. Every success story helps justify the massive investment we make into that final frontier.
All right, now we make the jump from the massive scale of space to the microscopic scale of materials science.
And we're focusing on an incredible piece of green innovation. It involves turning a universal waste product into a revolutionary new material.
This is one of my favorite stories of the week. Scientists have created an incredibly strong adhesive, a glue from waste cooking oil.
The initial tests are just jaw-dropping. This adhesive is strong enough to tow an entire car.
A car-towing glue made from old fryer grease. I'm just picturing them draining the vats at a fast food joint and pouring it into a polymer machine. It's a wild image.
It is, but how does the science actually work to get that kind of strength?
Right.
The process is really beautiful chemistry. They extract the fatty acids, the core components of the oil, and use them as building blocks.
To synthesize what?
Flexible, durable, and this is key moisture-resistant polymers. The result is a sustainable, petrochemical-free alternative to traditional glues.
And it actually outperforms them.
In many cases, yes, especially in humid conditions where a lot of traditional glues tend to fail.
The environmental payoff here is huge. You're tackling the massive waste stream of used cooking oil, and you're replacing fossil fuel-derived products.
It's a perfect 2-for-1. And the applications, beyond just towing cars in a lab, are widespread and immediate.
Like what? Construction.
In construction, its moisture resistance makes it ideal for things like structural panels or timber laminates. In packaging, it's a sustainable alternative to plastic-based adhesives.
You could use it in textiles, automotive.
The list goes on. This is a textbook example of material science contributing directly to a true circular economy. It provides superior performance while drastically reducing our reliance on unsustainable sources.
Let's move to the digital battleground now, which is just dominated by the rise of artificial intelligence, or AI.
And its influence on social media and authenticity. We're watching a fierce debate play out over AI influencers versus human creators.
What are the critics worried about?
They're worried that the rise of these sophisticated AI-generated personas is leading to content homogenization.
Meaning everything starts to look and sound the same.
Exactly. If the algorithms favor certain visual or narrative styles, human creators will just end up mimicking the successful AI models. You get a shallow, repetitive content pool that diminishes genuine human connection.
But the proponents argue the opposite, right? That it democratizes fame and influence.
They do. They argue that AI levels the playing field. It allows creators without traditional resources or, perfect appearances to generate high-quality, engaging content.
And they have examples to back that up.
They cite cases where both human and AI personas are getting huge follower counts and big brand deals. But it raises these profound questions about transparency, consumer trust, and how we even define genuine influence anymore.
Speaking of AI and the real world, let's talk about the constant ethical debate around autonomous driving.
Specifically, Tesla's full self-driving, or FSD, feature. There's a new controversy about it allowing passengers to text while traveling.
This just puts regulators in an impossible position.
It does. If the car is technologically capable of letting you be distracted, it implies that constant human attention is no longer necessary.
But all the public safety data still requires the driver to be the ultimate fail-safe.
So where does the regulator draw the line between backing up a self-driving car and babysitting it?
That's the core legal and safety question. Our liability laws were designed for human drivers, not autonomous systems.
Allowing texting suggests a level of autonomy that our current laws about distracted driving just haven't caught up to. The technology is advancing much faster than the governance can adapt, and it's creating a dangerous legal vacuum on our roads.
This tension over tech governance is global. It's spilling into a clash between the U.S. and the European Union over digital and speech regulations.
The tension is significant, especially after the EU hit American tech giants like Google and Apple with those massive fines under their new digital market rules.
And that prompted a statement from a top EU official.
Yes, European Commission Vice President Teresa Ribera. She made a very pointed statement, warning that the EU should listen to U.S. President Trump's views, but must never bow to his demands.
What specifically led to that strong language?
It was a direct response to threats. President Trump had previously suggested the U.S. might levy tariffs against the EU.
He accused their fines of being discriminatory against American companies.
Right. And Ribera's response was that the EU's green and digital agendas, which include regulations on data sovereignty and transparency, are vital for Europe's competitiveness and are not up for negotiation under the threat of tariffs.
They see it as protecting their internal market and their democratic standards.
Exactly.
We also saw the case of Imran Ahmed, a British social media campaigner. He was targeted by the U.S. government.
But he had his detention blocked by a U.S. judge this week.
What was he accused of?
He was accused of pressuring U.S. companies into censoring free speech. It's a classic conflict between First Amendment rights and national security concerns, made more complicated because it's cross-border influence.
So the judge's ruling highlights how complex it is to prosecute speech in the digital age.
It does. And Ahmed himself, who is a staunch critic of big tech, accused them of sociopathic greed in their pursuit of profit over the public good.
It really seems like digital governance is becoming a central topic for parliaments all over the world, not just in the U.S. and EU.
Absolutely. Spain's Congress, for instance, has summoned tech leaders Elon Musk and Mark Zuckerberg to discuss digital services governance.
And what's on their agenda?
The big issues: data privacy, algorithmic transparency, and the ethical use of AI. It signifies a global push to assert democratic control over platforms that fundamentally shape our public discourse.
Finally, let's return to that theme of system failure and look at Germany. Despite its reputation for technological prowess, a massive digital paradox has emerged.
It is genuinely astonishing. A recent report revealed that Germany, the economic engine of Europe, still relies heavily on analog systems.
How heavily?
77% of German companies still use fax machines.
Fax machines. In 2025. Why?
Primarily because they have to communicate with public authorities that haven't digitized. As a result, Germany ranks a dismal 24th in the European Union for digital public services.
24th. For a nation known for engineering excellence, how can they be so digitally backward?
The core problem is Germany's complex federal structure. Unlike centralized countries, data protection and digitization efforts are decentralized. They vary state by state.
Which prevents them from implementing a uniform, secure digital identity system.
Which is the foundational building block for all modern public services. You contrast that with Denmark, which has a one-stop digital shop with over 2,000 services.
Or India, with its massive Aadhaar digital ID and the UPI payments platform.
Right. Germany's inability to modernize its federal paperwork system is actively hindering its competitive edge. The fax machine is truly a metaphor for a national systemic failure.
A perfect illustration of how rigid political structure can stall technological progress.
It really is.
Okay, let's turn our attention now to the global economy, specifically consumer behavior after the big holiday shopping season.
And analysts are calling the results a Boxing Day bust.
Retailers were definitely left underwhelmed. They saw lower sales and footfall than they'd anticipated.
And this is partly a reflection of ongoing economic pressures. Consumers are just being more cautious. But it's also a deeper structural shift.
The pandemic effect.
Exactly. The COVID-19 pandemic permanently accelerated the shift to online shopping. That old model of, stampeding crowds for post-Christmas sales in physical stores.
Yeah.
It's just much less relevant now.
So what specific consumer trends define this more cautious spending period?
Two trends really stand out in the data. First, there was a measurable increase in thrift shopping. People are prioritizing value. They're using secondary markets to stretch their budgets.
Makes sense. And the second?
The second is maybe a bit counterintuitive. There were fewer product returns.
Fewer returns? What does that signal?
It signals highly cautious, deliberate spending habits. Consumers are making every purchase count. They're avoiding those impulse buys that they might have returned in the past.
Okay, shifting to personal finance and long-term planning, there's a pretty sobering warning out for people who are nearing retirement.
This is a critical reality check. Financial experts are warning that retiring with, say, $1.8 million, a sum a lot of people aspire to, is emphatically not a license for carefree spending.
It sounds like a lot of money. Why isn't it enough to be carefree?
To make that money last 30 years or more, you need a really strategic plan.
And what are the main forces that are eroding that seemingly large nest egg?
It's the twin forces of inflation and rising healthcare costs, especially in the U.S. They're the main culprits. Retirees have to rigorously use withdrawal strategies, like the 4% rule.
And plan for something called sequence of returns risk.
Right. Without meticulous budgeting that accounts for those escalating costs later in life, that 1.8 million can disappear much faster than you'd think, forcing a drastic reduction in living standards.
In the investment world, we're seeing a classic debate resurface. Gold versus Bitcoin.
The traditionalists versus the crypto enthusiasts. And right now, traditional financial advisors are urging a pivot
Away from crypto.
towards precious metals.
Yeah.
Gold and silver are currently rallying pretty strongly. The argument is that while cryptocurrencies like Bitcoin are volatile and sensitive to every regulatory announcement,
Gold and silver offer historical stability.
right, they act as reliable wealth preservation tools amid economic uncertainty and geopolitical turmoil. For the cautious investor, the appeal of a tangible asset is very strong right now.
For venture capitalists, the VCs, looking ahead to 2026, where is the smart money focusing its capital?
The VCs are definitely moving away from the purely speculative ventures that dominated the last decade.
So what are they prioritizing?
Investments in two core sectors that are expected to attract enormous funding: artificial intelligence and climate technology.
Why that pivot?
It's driven by global market demand, by scalability, and just by the sheer necessity of finding technological solutions to systemic environmental challenges.
But that shift towards sustainability isn't without massive risk. We saw that with the cautionary tale of insect.
Yes, Insect was a really high-profile failure in the sustainable protein sector. They raised over 600 million euros to scale up insect agriculture.
For animal feed and maybe even human consumption.
Right, but they struggled dramatically to sustain large-scale operations. Their failure highlights the immense capital needed, the complexity of scaling biological production, high feed costs,
And the regulatory hurdles.
labyrinthine regulatory hurdles to get insect-based products approved for consumption in different countries. It's a tough lesson that innovation alone doesn't guarantee success.
Okay, let's look at some national economic challenges. Starting with the UK, which is facing a pretty bleak forecast.
A Center for Economics and Business Research, or CEBR, report painted a very grim picture. It predicts the UK's gross domestic product, GDP, per capita growth will lag behind most of the other G7 nations.
And they're wrestling with what the report called a triple challenge.
Yes, high inflation that erodes purchasing power, substantial debt accrued during and after the pandemic, and chronically low productivity growth.
How far down the global rankings could this push them?
The forecast suggests the UK could slide down the global GDP per capita rankings by 2030. The economy seems stuck, and real disposable incomes are still lower than they were before the pandemic.
Meanwhile, Pakistan is dealing with a massive exodus of its most valuable human capital.
A severe brain drain. A really concerning report indicates a massive flight of highly skilled professionals, including 5,000 doctors and 11,000 engineers. This level of talent flight points to severe instability and a lack of economic opportunity that forces trained professionals to look elsewhere.
And that loss impacts everything. Critical services, tax
A
revenue.
whole long-term development potential of the nation? It's devastating.
And finally, Argentina is deep in the throes of some radical austerity measures.
President Javier Milei successfully passed his first budget through Congress, totaling $102 billion. Its core aim is to achieve a zero fiscal deficit through dramatic spending cuts.
Milei argues this is necessary to stabilize the hyperinflationary economy.
He does, but the immediate social cost is very high. This move has triggered widespread protests in Buenos Aires.
Especially because of cuts to essential areas.
Exactly, severe cuts affecting education and scientific research funding. Critics fear long-term damage to the nation's knowledge base and its future development.
Okay, let's return to conflict. We do have a moment of, well, genuine diplomatic success to report from Southeast Asia.
Yes, a fragile ceasefire has been agreed upon between Thailand and Cambodia.
This is a relief, especially given how severe the recent hostilities have been.
Following weeks of deadly clashes along their shared border, both nations agreed to an immediate ceasefire. These skirmishes had reignited after a previous truce was breached.
And it resulted in massive human displacement. The number I saw was nearly 1 million people.
That's right. That astonishing number really underscores the severity of what's often just casually called a border dispute.
It speaks to these deep historical tensions.
And the sheer fragility of peace in that region. The dispute often centers on control of historically significant temples and access to natural resources. So while the ceasefire is a crucial step,
The commitment to lasting dialogue remains highly fragile.
very fragile, and tragically, the security situation continues to be severe in Syria. There was a bombing of a mosque in Idlib.
Resulting in 11 deaths and 30 injuries, it's a persistent reminder that instability just continues to breed tragedy.
It does.
Shifting to Latin America, we're seeing accountability efforts unfold in Brazil after the attempted coup.
This is a major development. It shows the government's resolve to prosecute those who tried to undermine democracy.
Who was arrested?
Salvini Vasques. He was a key ally of former President Jair Bolsonaro and the former chief of Brazil's Federal Highway Police.
And he was arrested in Paraguay.
Yes, while trying to flee to El Salvador using a fake passport.
What were the specific charges against him?
He was convicted as an accomplice in the attempted coup that followed the 2022 election. Crucially, the charges relate to allegations that he used the highway police to interfere with voting.
Oh.
By setting up roadblocks and checkpoints in predominantly left-leaning regions in an attempt to suppress voter turnout. His arrest signals the Brazilian government is serious about holding everyone involved to account.
Meanwhile, in Honduras, their democratic processes are under intense scrutiny.
Thousands of Hondurans poured into the streets to protest outside the National Electoral Council, the CNE.
They were protesting against the proclamation of Nasri Asfura as president.
Yes. The protesters are citing widespread irregularities and a lack of transparency in the electoral process.
Were there specific claims of external interference?
They were. Critics of the results specifically claimed that Asfura was, and this is a quote, imposed by Trump through electoral manipulation.
So they're arguing that the U.S. exerted political and financial pressure to influence the outcome.
That's the claim. It highlights the persistent struggle for true democratic integrity and sovereignty in Central America, where the legacy of perceived U.S. intervention continues to fuel political suspicion and civil unrest.
Finally, let's look at Venezuela and President Nicolas Maduro's evolving diplomatic and ideological stance.
Maduro signaled a cautious, conditional shift toward reestablishing relations with the U.S.
He said he was willing to engage in dialogue.
Yes, provided that mutual respect is upheld. This is significant, as years of stringent U.S. sanctions have crippled the Venezuelan economy. He's clearly looking for a way to ease those pressures.
And ideologically, he made a very specific, pointed statement.
He paid public tribute to the revolutionary legacy of Mao Zedong. This is crucial signaling.
How so?
It reaffirms his commitment to leftist ideology and signals alignment with powerful non-Western nations. It's a hedge against future U.S. political isolation, a pushback against perceived foreign influence.
And in a show of regional solidarity, Venezuela's medical brigade was honored.
Yes, for their support to Cuba after Hurricane Melissa. These actions collectively show a region that's actively navigating its internal struggles for democracy while also trying to define its place in the world.
Sometimes by reaching out to former adversaries, sometimes by reaffirming old revolutionary ties.
Exactly.
We're going to return now to that theme of how the physical world often challenges our modern infrastructure. The sheer scale of disruption from Winter Storm Devon across the U.S. was immense.
It caused immediate widespread chaos. We saw over 1,500 flights canceled and nearly 7,000 delayed across the United States.
And this was during the peak holiday travel season?
The worst possible time. With over 40 million Americans under travel advisories, major hubs like JFK, Newark, and LaGuardia were just paralyzed.
The storm hit the Northeast particularly hard.
Yes. The National Weather Service, the NWS, predicted up to 10 inches of snow for the New York region.
Which was the highest snowfall the city had seen in 4 years.
Right. And this immediate threat led New York Governor Kathy Hochul to declare a state of emergency in several counties to mobilize resources for snow removal and emergency response.
And while the Northeast was locked down by snow, the West Coast was dealing with the complete opposite.
The hydrological opposite, yes. Southern California experienced its wettest Christmas holiday ever recorded.
Due to severe rainstorms.
An intense deluge that resulted in significant flooding and destructive mudslides, burying cars and homes in parts of the region. This weather pattern really highlights the intensifying drought to deluge cycle.
Which is a characteristic of shifting climate patterns.
Right. Long periods of dryness are punctuated by these extreme, dangerous rainfall events that just overwhelm the landscape.
This adverse weather globally also led to some tragic transportation incidents, particularly in Japan.
Japan experienced two devastating highway pileups amid heavy snow and low visibility. The worst was a massive 50 to 67 vehicle pileup on the Kanetsu Expressway in Gunma Prefecture.
Northwest of Tokyo.
Yes, it tragically killed at least 2 people and injured 26 others. These incidents are just a stark reminder of the extreme dangers that unpredictable weather poses to high-speed transport.
And a terrible bus disaster occurred on a famously dangerous route in Latin America.
In Guatemala, a passenger bus plunged nearly 75 meters, that's about 250 feet, into a ravine on the perilous Inter-American Highway.
In the Solola department.
Yes, killing at least 15 people and injuring dozens more. This kind of tragedy always raises critical discussions about regulatory oversight, vehicle maintenance, and safety improvements on these notoriously treacherous routes.
We also saw losses tied to outdoor recreation.
Yes, the tragic loss of 4 hikers in a central Greece avalanche on Christmas Day. And at the same time in Indonesia, search efforts were underway for a Spanish family of 4 after their tourist boat sank during rough seas.
It just shows how quickly unpredictable weather can turn routine travel or recreation into a fatal encounter.
It really does.
Finally, let's address a major infrastructure safety debate in Japan concerning nuclear power.
The planned restart of the Kashiwazaki Kariwa nuclear power plant is generating intense safety fears.
And this is operated by Tokyo Electric Power Company, or TEPCO.
The very same TEPCO responsible for the Fukushima disaster. Critics are arguing that this plant's construction is inherently vulnerable to earthquakes due to weak ground construction.
It was described, I think, memorably as being built on tofu.
That's the quote. And what that engineering metaphor implies is a high risk of soil liquefaction during a major seismic event.
Given Japan's high earthquake risk and TEPCO's documented failures at Fukushima,
the public and safety experts are escalating concerns that restarting this plant is just an unacceptable risk based on a flawed design and a terrible operational history.
Okay, this segment is going to cover critical issues of public safety and accountability. We'll start in Paris, France, with a worrying metro stabbing incident that exposed a significant security failure.
The incident involved a rapid sequence of events. A man stabbed 3 women at separate stations along Line 3 République, Arts et Métiers, and Opera.
And the suspect was apprehended quickly.
The 25-year-old Malian suspect was, yes. But the critical detail that came out later is the system failure. The suspect had previously been required to leave France after serving time for aggravated theft and sexual assault.
But he was never deported. Why not?
The failure was traced to a bureaucratic breakdown. Missing consular documentation. Without the necessary paperwork from his home country, France couldn't enforce the deportation order.
And this highlights a recurring, massive enforcement gap in many European countries.
It does. Convicted foreign nationals are legally required to leave, but can't be physically removed due to these diplomatic or bureaucratic hurdles. And it has immediate, profound security consequences.
Meanwhile, Italian authorities conducted a highly significant operation against terror funding.
They arrested 9 individuals tied to 3 separate charitable organizations.
For allegedly funneling a substantial amount of money.
Approximately 7 million euros, or about $8.2 million, to Hamas. Among those arrested was a major figure in the Hamas network operating within Italy.
7 million euros funneled through charities. That raises profound global concerns.
It does. It underscores the complex methods terrorist organizations use to cloak financial transfers under the guise of humanitarian aid. They exploit the global banking system and charitable goodwill.
And it raises the need for stricter oversight.
Absolutely. Stricter monitoring of large charitable contributions to prevent their diversion into illegal activities.
We also saw some horrific and tragic attacks on law enforcement in the U.S. this week.
In Delaware, at the Newcastle Department of Motor Vehicles, the DMV, a gunman named Raman Rose fatally shot Trooper Matthew Snook.
And there was a detail that stood out, reflecting a chilling calculation.
Yes. Rose reportedly allowed customers to leave the facility before he opened fire on the approaching officers. Trooper Snook showed immense heroism, managing to push a DMV employee out of harm's way before he was killed.
And there was another incident in Idaho.
A shooting at the Shoshone County Sheriff's Office. The gunman was neutralized, and 3 individuals sustained minor injuries.
Turning to accountability in high-profile sexual assault cases, the legal fallout from the Harvey Weinstein saga continues with a truly devastating familial twist.
Kaja Sokolow, one of Weinstein's accusers, is now being sued for defamation by her own sister, Iwa Sokolow.
Her sister, why?
Iwa was called as a witness in the trial, but her testimony, though truthful, inadvertently aided the defense's case. Ewan now claims that Kaja's public statements about the trial have damaged her medical practice back in Poland.
That is an extraordinarily painful complexity. It just shows how these high-stakes legal battles don't just affect the perpetrator and victim, they can tear entire families apart.
It's a tragedy layered upon another tragedy. And on another high-profile case, scrutiny of the official narrative around Jeffrey Epstein's death continues.
And the debate often centers on a key detail about his medical assessment just before he died.
That's right. Reports resurfaced this week noting that days before he died by suicide, Epstein was assessed as having a low overall suicide risk.
And that detail continues to fuel intense debate and speculation.
It does. It makes people question whether protocols failed completely or whether there was a deliberate attempt to minimize his risk level, which lends credence to theories of a political cover-up.
Finally, let's end this segment with a moment of brilliant civic intervention from Philadelphia.
I appreciate this story. It showcases grassroots creativity, filling a vacuum left by failed city services. We're talking about the anonymous artist dubbed the Bus Stop Banksy.
What do they do?
Frustrated by the lack of real-time bus tracking information, this artist installed beautiful, handmade chalkboard-style signs at various bus stops.
Providing what?
The actual real-time arrival times for the buses. It's a completely grassroots artistic solution to a city planning failure. It's just a desire to help your fellow commuter when public transit falls short.
Our final segment dives into the current state of political culture, the collision of polarization and humor, and how technology is mediating all the absurdity.
And we have to start with a highly controversial use of AI humor by a Republican state lawmaker in Indiana.
This would be State Senator Chris Garton.
Yes. He faced severe backlash after posting AI-generated images of himself violently fighting Santa Claus on Christmas morning.
Fighting Santa Claus, and the reaction was immediate and negative.
People viewed it as inappropriate for the holiday and unbecoming of an elected official. But when he was criticized, Garton immediately leaned into the cultural divide.
He defended his actions by dismissing his detractors as snowflakes.
Exactly. He placed the incident squarely within the American culture wars. This whole thing reveals not just questions about AI and political discourse, but how quickly modern politicians weaponize polarizing language to deflect criticism and galvanize their base.
It's rewarding provocation over reflection.
That's a great way to put it.
Speaking of political controversy, President Trump's decision to rename the Kennedy Center after himself sparked an immediate firestorm.
The move was immediately viewed by critics as political narcissism and an insult to a national institution. It led directly to at least one performer calling off their Christmas Eve show in protest.
And the media debate was highly polarized. I saw the exchange between CNN's Abby Phillip and Republican strategist Scott Jennings.
That conversation was very revealing. Jennings tried to frame the renaming as simply justifiable branding, consistent with Trump's business background.
But Phillip challenged that defense.
She did. She countered by questioning the broader implications of this type of executive action, the use of presidential power to disrespect national cultural institutions, and the precedent it sets.
It perfectly crystallized the two polarized views of Trump.
Either he's a master brander or he's a destructive force undermining national unity. There's no middle ground.
This political tension and bias is even reaching into educational environments internationally. There's a worrying case out of the UK.
An alarming situation at Henley College in Oxfordshire. A teacher was forced to resign after showing videos of President Trump to students as part of a current events class.
And the consequences were severe.
The local child protection agency classified his actions as potentially amounting to a hate crime. This was after complaints that the lessons were biased and emotionally disturbing.
A teacher showing election discussion material being compared to radicalization, that seems like a severe overreach.
The teacher described the treatment he received as dystopian. He argued the videos are contextually relevant to discussing the U.S. election. It reflects extremely high political tensions and a perceived left-wing bias in some educational environments,
where even attempting to impartially discuss a conservative figure like Trump can lead to accusations of misconduct. We also had commentary this week on media influence from some global leaders.
Specifically, Venezuelan President Nicolas Maduro. He publicly urged U.S. media organizations not to yield to extremist lobbying groups. He called for greater journalistic independence.
It's a common critique from non-Western leaders, reflecting a broader global concern about the impact of powerful special interests on information.
And on international policy.
And finally, a significant internal rift emerged within India's main opposition party.
Yes, in the Congress Party. It was sparked when one of their senior leaders, Digvijaya Singh, publicly praised the organizational capabilities of their rival, the BJP, and its parent organization, the RSS.
And that praise was not well received internally.
It was immediately interpreted by many critics within his own party as a veiled criticism of Congress's own leadership and its organizational failings. It highlights the strategic and existential debates the Congress party is having as it struggles to mount an effective challenge to a very powerful opponent.
So if we zoom out after this comprehensive deep dive, we've witnessed a week of just relentless contrast.
We really have. We saw these persistent, life-threatening global crises, the freezing conditions in Ukraine, that fragile ceasefire in Yemen, the diplomatic fallout over Somaliland.
And yet at the same time, we're celebrating these stunning scientific advancements. We're decoding cancer-fighting compounds from nature.
And confirming the location of critical, accessible water on Mars.
Tying it all together is that central theme of friction we started with, the collision of astonishing new technology with these rigid, antiquated systems.
Right. We saw that waste cooking oil can be synthesized into glue that can tow a car, and AI is becoming a social media celebrity.
And yet, this same global society is burdened by the reality that 77% of companies in the German economy still rely on fax machines.
So what does this all mean for you, our well-informed listener? We often measure progress through these monumental achievements, like landing on Mars or curing cancer.
But this week really showed us that the friction points, from a delayed flight because of snow, to a judge's ruling on digital speech, to a hospital mixing up deceased bodies, are often tied to the same fundamental issue.
How quickly can our systems be political, infrastructural, or even social adapt to a world that changes at the speed of a single WhatsApp message?
The resistance to change is often just as powerful as the innovation itself.
Indeed. We're constantly innovating our way forward, but we often fail to govern our way forward.
So given the failure of the UK to update its economy and Germany to update its digital systems, here's our question for you to ponder. Which essential, outdated aspect of your own country's infrastructure or political process do you think is next to break under the pressure of 21st century change?
Something to think about until our next deep dive.
You're enjoying Artificially Informed.
Hit subscribe and share it with a friend.
From the left, the right, and straight from the algorithm.
Thank you.
That's it for today's Artificially Informed.
Nope. Thanks for spending your time with us.
Yeah.
Stay sharp, stay curious. See you next time.